You're listening to the Zelos podcast. I'm your host, Rocky Snyder. This week, we're changing the channel a little bit. We're going to be talking about lacrosse with Nate Neff, physical therapist and head of rehabilitation for Premier League Lacrosse. Before we get underway, remember, we've got continuing education workshops constantly going on, online as well as in person. One that's coming up in Capitola, California, November 3rd. An in-person workshop for the day is posture-based soft tissue mobilization. You can get more information on my website, rockysnyder.com. CEUs available for all health and fitness professionals. Also, check out setantacollege.com. They've got master's programs for Masters of Science in Sports Injury and Return to Performance, performance coaching, psychology, and a whole bunch more. Remember, click the subscribe button before it gets underway and follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder. Here we go. Well, Nate, welcome to Zelos, man. It's good to have you on. I know we're going to have a whole bunch of things to talk about, but first, welcome. Tell me how Vail, Colorado is.
Love it. Thank you. I really appreciate you having me. And it's fun to be involved in something like this. And because I've listened to so many podcasts from performance and PT related folks and learned from a lot. So I really appreciate being in this position with you right now. And today Vail is looking beautiful. It's like 75, sunny, little breeze. It's perfect.
That's going to change, I'm sure. Here we are in August. Wait a few more weeks and you'll be knee deep in snow. But well, this is a selfish pursuit on my part. If there's any listening in the audience and they're getting something out of it, that's great. But for me, I get a captive audience I can ask questions and learn so much from. So this will be no exception either. So you're with the Premier Lacrosse League as the lead physical therapist, but you also delve into a whole bunch of other sports. Being in Vail, you got a lot of athletes going through there, and not just winter sports athletes, but NFL, NBA, NHL, and so on, which we'll delve into more in a little bit. But before we get underway, just give me the superhero origin. How did you get to where you are?
Absolutely. So I would say I fall in that pretty common category of being a young athlete, high school, things like that, playing a lot of sports. I played football, baseball, ran a lot of track growing up, and I hurt my knee playing football. And then I went through physical therapy, realized that there was this thing called PT out there, and I always wanted to be a strength coach. And so then I realized that I could kind of combine the two. And that's where the passion for movement and everything stemmed from. And then ended up going to a branch campus of Pittsburgh for my undergrad and got a really good kind of close-knit education there, which was amazing. And then I got into St. Augustine, Florida for PT school and went to Florida. So one from north central Pennsylvania, where it was very cold, windy, snowy, dreary, to sunny St. Augustine on the coast. And that was a great change and got a great education there. And during that time, my girlfriend, my now wife, finished her graduateship assistant role in University of Florida, and then she went on and got a residency at the Stedman Clinic in Vail, Colorado, and so that's how I found out about Vail. And I was looking to get into a sports residency, and she was like, "You should look into Howard Head Sports Medicine in Vail." And I was like, "I don't know, I never really heard of it," but then I looked into it, and I was like, "Wow, this is amazing! I can't wait to try to get in there." And that was over 8 years ago. And so I started at Howard Head as a sports resident 8 years ago.
Wow, very cool. Now, were you married at the time when you were back in St. Augustine and she was finishing up
No,
at UO? No.
we
So you
actually met in
followed her
undergrad.
out. She dragged you along
Yep.
and you
Dragged
just
me to
like
Vail.
a dumb puppy just followed her. I get it.
Yeah, exactly. I was like, not a better place to try to follow her too. So it was great. And it's been an adventure, and I couldn't ask for a better time because it's been an amazing ride and really fun to be here.
So give me a vision of what Howard Head's all about.
So Howard Head, we try to really be on the cutting edge of sports medicine and things like return to play criteria, and just trying to provide a really good scope of orthopedic and sports med practice. And we work very closely with our strong partners of the Stedman Clinic, the orthopedic practice, world-renowned surgeons and orthopedic partners. We're separate entities, so we're not owned by them or anything like that. But we have a really good partnership where our PTs work one-on-one with their patients, and we provide protocols, and we try to work as a team to help bounce ideas off in terms of rehab approach. and return to play criteria and all these different things. And so, me personally, I work as lead therapist for Dr. Peter Millett. He was a shoulder, elbow, and knee specialist, and the surgeons from the Stedman Clinic and the PT at Howard Head kind of brings in patients from all over the place, so all over the country, and then even internationally as well. And so it's a very unique thing that I live in this little place called Vail, Colorado. We're 2 hours from the nearest international airport in Denver, and yet we're like a world-renowned sports medicine center that sees patients from all over the country and the world. And so it's very unique in that sense. And so a lot of post-operative patients, a lot of patients that are also just trying to get a second opinion from their sports teams and their orthopedic doctors back home, things like that.
Well, Vail is definitely on the map. It's not known for its low income levels, that's for sure.
For
So
sure.
to have extensive resources at your disposal just makes sense. And I know when people think of Vail, they think of skiing and snowboarding. And I know you're a purist and you don't think much of us snowboarders, but whatever, we can still have a conversation. Yeah, we've ruined it for everybody else, I'm sure. But 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 aside from the winter sports, and we'll get on to lacrosse in a minute,
Mhm.
what other obviously other athletes are there, but as a shoulder, elbow, knee specialist that you're working under,
Mhm.
is there a certain sport profile athlete that is typically coming to see? Are we talking mainly throwing, rotary athletes? What are we talking?
I would say generally it's a large amount of NFL and NHL players that have really made a good connection with Dr. Millett and the Player Association. So he's well known throughout the whole agency. And so when somebody hurts their shoulder or dislocation or anything like that, or their knee for that matter, they kind of say, I want a second opinion. Who do I go to? And their agent or the professional agency knows of Dr. Millett. So they're like, you got to go to this guy because he's the best. And then I'm fortunate enough to then also work with them and help manage their protocols and communicate with the teams from then, if they have surgery, if they don't, whatever it is. So he sees a lot of those athletes, a lot of stabilization procedures with those like impact sports, dislocations, that kind of situation. And but generally, there's really all aspects of athletes, from Olympic athletes to Howard Head is also the official PT provider for the U.S. ski and snowboard teams, and so is Stedman. They're the official orthopedic provider for them. So if a professional skier gets hurt or anybody preparing for the Summer Olympics or just now after the Summer Olympics, they're coming out to see us and to get an opinion or possibly have surgery.
Okay, so I'm just going to paint a scenario, whether it's with
Mm-hmm.
Colorado Avalanche or Denver
Mm-hmm.
Broncos. We'll just take one of your local teams there. You get one of
Yep.
their players who has some type of massive blowout on their knee, medial meniscus, ACL, just complete uh, chaos. And they go through the surgery. Then are you the prime go-to as the PT, or does the team go, okay, we'll take it from here? Like, how does that exchange work? Is it immediate? Do you feel, is it different from one team to the next? How does it work?
It is, it's generally can be pretty different though, because every team's gonna kind of go about it in a different way. I've really realized that every organization throughout pro sports is gonna handle things a little bit differently, communication wise, all that. But generally, they're gonna go and see a doc at Stedman first. And because I work so closely with Dr. Millett, if they see him, I'm probably gonna be the one that sees him for rehab afterwards. But we do have a team lead physical therapist for all the different surgeons throughout, and so generally, if they see that particular doc, they're going to see the lead therapist for that doc as well. But there's plenty of overlap, and we work really well together. And I'm familiar with all the doc's protocols, and we go through it a lot. So generally, they'll see them, they'll get a recommendation from them, and then they'll say, "Go see Howard Head, go see Nate." Because we want to really get a different opinion for your rehab approach and see what else can be done in this moment.
Great. And so what are we talking? Like the athlete will stick around Vail for 3 to 4 weeks, and then they'll go back to where they have other support staff. Is that how it typically goes?
Yes, it's a very unique situation where you might see the athlete for anywhere from a couple days or one session to weeks at a time. There's been athletes that have had surgery and then choose to spend months in Vail and kind of move to Vail for rehab in that sense and for follow-ups with their surgeon or doc. And So yeah, it can range a big kind of wide range of time frames. So it is a very interesting situation where I might have to dive in and try to help figure out something for this athlete within a visit or a few days. And then maybe come back in 6 weeks and then have 4 months or something in the recovery. So it's interesting. Sometimes I'm in communication between those sessions, but it's a lot of follow-ups, a lot of reassessments, and a lot of communication to their doc.
So you have a facility within Hilton Head that Howard Head, excuse me,
There
that
you
Hilton Head. I knew it was going to
go. I mean,
happen.
it's a
I
great
knew
spot.
it was. It's not bad either. But Howard Head, so you within your brick and mortar, you have a full-on training facility, so somebody can go from post-op acute care to like rehab, return to performance right there, and
Yeah, we
then
have a
go.
yeah, generally we have a great space where it was being all remodeled when I was a resident almost 8 years ago, and so it's all finished up, and we have state of the art facility with plenty of equipment and devices, and return to sport assessment tools, force plates, isokinetic, um, power leg press, like different things all across the gamut, and but sometimes the hardest part is like trying to get out onto the field because we are technically in the hospital, so it is confined in that sense. But and if it's anything kind of out on the field, kind of running, cutting, decel work, then it's generally going to be us communicating with the performance staff to try to get that aspect in. But tons of stuff that we can do in facility, and it's great from going from on the table, post-op work, range of motion right away, which is huge in our facility. We start rehab day zero, day one, usually right after the next morning, and whole way to return to sport.
Right on. Well, man, if the waves weren't just bomber in the wintertime here in Santa Cruz, I might think of applying for seasonal hire
Yeah, we
in
do a seasonal
Vail in the
role.
winter. Of course
Yeah,
you do. You're just going to dig
yeah.
that knife in and twist it now to me.
But
Yeah.
mainly you're set up in the emergency department because we see the ski athletes and snowboard athletes immediately from the hill. Ski patrol brings them into the emergency department. They do an x-ray, whatever it is. We go right into, I'd say they tore their ACL. We go right into bracing, exercise prescription, education, get them walking as soon as we can, and then possibly schedule for surgery or whatever ends
Wow.
up being the case.
That's a great system.
Yeah.
So it wasn't too long ago. It was probably like a year and a half ago. I was back in Foxborough, Massachusetts, at Gillette Stadium, and within
Oh,
Patriot Place is Tom Brady's
oh,
training
I'll,
facility,
I'll be there this
TB12.
weekend actually. I'll
You're
be there
going to
going to
TB12?
pretty much because of the PLL's quarterfinal competition is at Gillette Stadium on Labor Day. So that's where I'm going.
Oh man, make a point of heading into TB12 because
It's right there at
I
Patriot Place. Yeah.
exactly. It's a good facility. It's very simple, basic, but it's everything they need. There's some treatment rooms off the side of where the
Hmm.
AstroTurf and the movement area is. And so they just put me through a nice session where we looked at my mechanics, a little alignment, and so on, brought me over to the table, worked some soft tissue, brought me out to the movement area, got me doing a few drills, noticed a few things, brought me back to the room, worked a little bit other area, and I'm like, oh,
Perfect.
this is brilliant. I am loving this interplay back and forth, work on this issue in the tissue and then go load it or move it and so on. I'm
Hmm.
getting a feeling like this is your meat and this is your bread and butter. This is what you love doing.
100%. I'm very manual therapy based and like skilled in that sense, but it's everything always comes back to trying to load and move better, be more confident in your body movements, and then be able to tolerate your sport even more. So I do a lot of hands-on work with soft tissue work, whether it's like massage work or deep tissue or scraping, cupping, classic stuff. I also have been really working hard to be very skilled at dry needling. And through companies like EIM and Institute of Clinical Excellence, I do some manipulation work as well through Institute of Clinical Excellence or ICE. Big fan of them. Shout out to them. And then it's all about loading after you get into that. So I love that kind of situation, and you make them feel a little bit better, desensitize things in the moment, learn a little bit about the tissue, and then go load it, move better.
So do you get any pushback from other professionals, such as chiropractors or those that are acupuncturists or traditional TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, where you're utilizing some of their tools and they're, I don't know if it's an ego issue or what. It's like I'm feeling threatened because you're using the things that I've spent years and years doing. And do you,
Yeah.
Do you run into that?
I personally haven't ran into that of like an actual acupuncturist like talking to me about it, but it's something that our PT legislation has to deal with all the time. And most of the states are open to PTs dry needling, but some states like California and New York, I think, are still limited in that sense. Um, but our kind of feedback is that we really study the anatomy in PT school, tons of baseline education there, and then we do these uh, tons of hours of training over the weekends. Like a 3-day course is required in Colorado to then even practice it in the clinic, and then you try to record some hours and progress there. But um, and yeah, definitely some feedback on that, but I just try to use it as a tool in my toolbox, and it's not my end all be all treatment. So I have plenty of ways to get a patient better, and that's just the component. So I'm not too stressed about it, and I just try to let the legislation do its job and try to promote that it's safe, and we definitely are skilled enough to do it.
Right on. Okay, you mentioned a toolbox, and we already spoke about a few tools. I'm curious about other tools in your toolbox. Obviously, there's manual therapy, there's cupping, there's dry needling, and of course, there's loading the body with
Yep.
movements. And we can go full spectrum. I don't care about that. What are the
Sure.
tools? What are your go-to? What do you pull out of your back pocket? And don't say my hands and my eyes, because just a cop out. I
Sure, yeah,
understand that.
absolutely. I also enjoy the concepts from the function range conditioning group, FRC, and just the idea of um, getting your tissues to be more tolerant through a full range of motion. And so the FRC components, I use a little bit of that, use a little bit of what I've learned from the ICE courses and the different kind of movement-based strategies. And it's just like I take a little chunk of each kind of all these different Con Ed courses and things I've learned from in the past and try to kind of group it all together. So there might be a session where I use some big concepts from maybe 3 or 4 different courses that I've taken in the last 5 years. And it's really kind of a fun thing to realize that I chose this option for this patient, this treatment approach because of this background and this research and this experience. And to kind of combine it all together is really fun. But so the working through full ranges of motion like FRC and improving that internal tension and just the strength of the tissues and everything like that, the strength. And then really kind of comes down to just proper training and load versus capacity and making sure that the patient or the athlete understands that maybe they're in pain or having an issue because they loaded too fast or too soon or too much and the capacity wasn't quite there and ready for it. um, and
So,
add in a little like sports psych, not necessarily sports psych, but more of like pain neuroscience and just helping them understand that pain is multifactorial and lots of things go into it.
how would you have that conversation? I'm curious.
It depends. It depends on how sensitive the person is to their pain and talking about different thresholds and intensity of pain and how, how chronic things have been and that can lower the threshold for pain. And in my practice, I have it a lot with post-op patients. And I talk about how you just had trauma from an injury, most likely, and then from surgery combined with that. And so I talk a lot about hurt doesn't equal harm. Your shoulder or your knee is very sensitive. It's swollen, it's inflamed, it's recovering. And so when you have pain, it doesn't mean tissues are being damaged. It doesn't mean anything like that. So I like to say hurt doesn't equal harm. And I really start off in that sense and then try to chip away at it throughout sessions to help them understand it if I need to. But I like to say that very at the very beginning of rehab because when they move or they guard a little bit or they transfer right after shoulder surgery and they have pain, they're going to be fearful. They're going to be worried that they're going to ruin their surgery. And if I can decrease that fear and help promote their confidence, then I'm all for it.
Okay, and you don't have to answer this next question, but I'm just curious, and I have to ask. It's like
Yeah,
you like myself, love to accumulate letters, but
yeah,
really knowledge. They just give
yeah.
you letters after you've gone through a course, right? You don't really care about the
Hmm.
letters. Yeah, I mean, you could have your own
Exactly.
alphabet soup. It's more
Right.
the knowledge that you're pursuing, but that comes at a cost,
Hmm.
literally like a financial cost. And there's some organizations that would be very good at supporting continuing education, and you present them with an idea. Hey, I want to go to
Hmm.
this lecture, this course and workshop. Can you cover the cost? Can you meet me halfway? If you don't
Hmm.
mind me asking, is this all out of pocket pursuits for you, or are you in a position where you have support?
Great question. Actually, huge shout out to Howard Head and Vale Health, where they have an extremely amazing continuing education program where we get $5,000 a year to work on continuing education, which is at least 5 times more than most clinics. You might be lucky to get $1,000 a year. So I've been very, very fortunate in that sense, and I've tried to take advantage of it as much as I can. And that's where the letters and the kind of stuff come from. And really, with the letters behind my name, especially on LinkedIn, I'm just trying to promote that I have that knowledge base, kind of like get the proof that I have that knowledge base. And I like to show that it's just a well-rounded thing. But yeah, Howard had great continuing education program, and that's helped me get the certifications, helped me branch out and really kind of specialize in numerous things like we talked about. And it's really great because we go to the course, they pay for our travel, our mileage if we drive, or airfare, hotels, food. It's great. And you'd be surprised at how actually easy it is to spend $5,000 in a year when it comes to traveling to a different state or whatever it is for a few courses. Dry needle course is like $1,200 right there.
You have such a wonderful way of digging that knife in a little deeper with a twist. I love it. No, I'm envious. I think that's a wonderful thing. And in fact, Zealous is the Greek god of envy, not just competition.
Oh, there we go.
So hence the name Zealous. Where did that come from? Yeah, it's like it's Nike's twin or something, sister or brother. Yes. So I prefer it's the winged god of competition, but every now and then envy pokes its ugly head at me. And right now I am envious, and that's wonderful. So let's just say the coffers aren't completely dry and you still have a little bit left, and it's the 8th month of the year. You got 4 more. Are there any courses you're intrigued about or interested in?
Yes, actually, I was thinking about, after some discussions with our management team and some of the leads in my clinic when it comes to return to sport testing after ACL, I was thinking about this online course. I honestly right now forget the name, but online course talking about different like force plate testing and how to kind of tease out the different components of a jump, like counter movement jump, and how to see where an athlete is limited in that final phase of the neuromuscular kind of the rehab. Well, it's really the whole phase, but that final phase of rehab when they're trying to do powerful movements and jump and land and trying to break it down and see where they're limited. So then you can then break down the movements and improve their ability afterwards. That's something I've been thinking about a lot. There's also, I might look to refresh some of my manipulation skills or take an advanced dry needling course coming up soon, all in December, perhaps.
We'll see. Oh, right on. Yeah, you're hungry. I love it. And sounds like not only is your appetite nice and stable, but it's probably unsatiated or insatiable. You just want to keep on learning. Okay, let's change the direction here. I would love to learn more about Premier Lacrosse League, the PLL. How did you get involved with the PLL?
Long story short, I've been always wanting to get into professional sports since I started as a sports resident, and I was working really hard, like endlessly trying to get into a professional sports team, working very hard. I was applying to a lot of NBA teams, and so NBA was a really big pull for me. I had a lot of connections. This was probably 3 or 4 years ago, and consistently every year applying in the off season, and when anything came up, and I kept getting closer and closer. I like to say that I was failing better every time and getting closer. And then and I got in the top 3 a few times with a few teams. But when I was preparing for that, I really set myself up for success to then be ready for this PLL opportunity, because then 3 years ago now, my management team came to me and said, we have this opportunity to do a deal with Howard, or with the PLL, and make Howard Head the official PT provider along with Stedman. And would you want to be the lead? Would you want to be the head therapist for the league? And I said, absolutely, I would love to. And so finished on my 3rd season now. And when I started off, we were all trying to figure it out together. It was a brand new thing for the league, brand new thing for us, brand new thing for me, because I never played lacrosse. I never knew anything really about it going into it. But it was a good example that if you have a good baseline of knowledge in PT and understanding of movement, then you can figure out the nuances from there. But I learned a ton in the PLL in that first season or so, and figured out ways that we could improve every single season. So we've been well on our way. But so yeah, the opportunity was presented to me, and I just had to capitalize on it, and it was great.
Right on. What were the low-hanging fruits when you began?
Really just trying to provide great PT over the weekend. So generally the league travels around to a different city every weekend. So it's a traveling league in a very unique way where every team will play in a certain city, in one city each weekend, and then they travel to the next city and then the next city. And so the low-hanging fruit for me was just being able to provide good, maybe more so like manual therapy based treatment on the weekend that athletes were looking for, kind of sore, banged up going into their competition and practice. And that was kind of the baseline need in that moment. But then it turned into a lot more after that.
And so, not having the background in lacrosse, I mean,
Mm-hmm.
that shouldn't have swayed any opinion one way or the other. I guess I'm saying that more to the listening audience because if we understand biomechanics, understand movements, understand, in your case, rehabilitative protocols and assessments and so on, then it's really regardless of any sport. Once you understand what's required in the movements, I mean, you can
Yep.
plug yourself in quite readily. But
Exactly.
what were the big surprises? What were the things that made you kind of go, "What the heck? Oh,
Hmm.
I wasn't expecting that."
About like the injuries and the rehab process, or just about the
That's just
sport?
the experience, the sport, the injuries, and so on.
Mm,
Did you go, "Oh man, this is remarkably similar to soccer or hockey
hmm.
or any other like skiing"? What
Yeah,
other activities or sports that you are much more familiar with?
for sure. I would say number one would be soccer in terms of the sprinting and change of direction and being a field-based sport. In terms of then hamstrings, groin injuries, soft tissue injuries of the lower body, back pain, situations like that. Very, very similar and across the board and very consistent with that. And then I was pretty surprised by the unique challenge of the PLL in the sense that a lot of players work a second job. So the salaries at the current phase of pro lacrosse, the salaries need to be supplemented a lot of times by the athletes, so they have a separate job, and they may work in finance or on Wall Street or something where they're sitting at a desk most of the week, and then they're playing the highest and most competitive pro lacrosse there is on the weekends. So it's a very interesting combo where I'm almost working with a desk work patient and then also a professional athlete at the same time. And that was very surprising and very challenging. And it still is a challenge that I'm working through right now, and trying to just continuously improve on. And then the challenges after the pro lacrosse players finish college. In certain ways, the college lacrosse game is more exciting for the athlete, or more so for the fan, because stadiums are filled for these lacrosse college lacrosse games, but it's getting better and better in the professional realm. And so, and players go from kind of working with a team and having maybe a PT, an athletic trainer, or numerous ones, and then a strength coach, and having their whole kind of programming figured out for them and the timing, and they kind of just show up and work hard and they can make it happen. And then they're on their own. Now they're a professional and they're kind of on their own in certain ways where now they need some more guidance in terms of their strength and conditioning and their performance. And then because their teams are, they have the team and they mainly practice throughout the season one night, and then they have the game the next day. So maybe they practice Friday, the game's on Saturday, but then they go home to their respective states or their towns, and they don't see each other until the next weekend. So it's a unique situation in that they travel all over, but they don't have like a home base quite yet. And that's the goal for the league in the future. But so they have to kind of do the training on their own, either maybe finishing up the workday 9 to 5 and then having the train and trying to figure it all out from there. But so I've really worked hard to try to promote different programming and different off season and in season strength and conditioning work, all this stuff that has been a challenge for sure, but all very rewarding and fun.
Yeah, that's kind of cool. I mean, I just think of old school. When I say old school, I'm thinking back like 60 or 70 years with burgeoning teams that were trying to make it the young NBA, the young NFL. These guys weren't being paid very much. And if they
Yeah.
couldn't eke out a living as a professional athlete, they had to get the side jobs. Now, granted, at that time, technology was much lower. So the likelihood of more physical activity in a career that they chose was probably going to be greater. They worked on the farm or they worked in the
Sure.
assembly line or
Yeah.
something of that nature. Today, like you say, some of them are working on Wall Street. Most often they're going to have some type of sedentary occupation for the most part. So therefore, you're going with extremes. You're taking the body to an extreme sedentary position, and you're going full bore on the pitch over the
Yep.
weekend. So the body is being really almost torn in two different directions simultaneously. So is there a high? I'm thinking what comes to mind right now is softball and pickleball. I think they're probably the two the highest injury rate of any recreational sport going in America right now is
Yep.
because fat lazy people can play softball, and there's usually a
Yep.
keg of beer on the sidelines in the dugout,
Right.
and or on the side of the court in pickleball. You just hear about, oh my gosh, you're playing pickleball, but along with this, we're talking a younger crowd. Obviously, they're just fresh out
Mhm.
of college, so they're 23 to 27 years old.
Yep.
Their
And
bodies
older
have
for sure.
not. And so, what's the incident rate like if you could just compare it to other organizations and associations that you're dealing with? I know
That's
you
a
don't have the
great
stats, but
question.
just
Yeah,
anecdotally.
um, that's a tough one. I would just say it's generally probably 15-20% higher than the other sports because of that extreme, like you said, nature back and forth from sedentary to running, cutting, just shuffling on the field and doing extreme speeds. But yeah, that's something that data-wise we're trying to work on that maybe going forward is trying to actually put those numbers in and try to see how it compares to other sports such as soccer, MLS, things like that. But yeah, tons of that soft tissue issue with those high-speed sports, and players do range from that like just out of college to maybe even 38 years old. Like there's some older guys in there for sure, and those guys usually know at that point how to take care of themselves and prepare and kind of manage it throughout the week because they've got to that far for a reason, like kind of thing. And but when these kids, so to speak, are coming out of college, they maybe were banged up throughout college and they kind of just got through it and they were able to play, able to perform well, get drafted into the PLL, but now they don't really necessarily have a full understanding of how to be a professional athlete. And so us at Howard Head and Stedman, we're trying to come along with them and try to lift them up and help promote that and try to say, okay, this is how the kind of the week between the games should look like with your performance, your recovery, your training, on-field work, things like that. And something that I've talked with Paul Rabel a lot about. He was the co-founder of the league and known as the best lacrosse player of all time, or the LeBron James of lacrosse. We talked about trying to do like a pitch count for lacrosse players as well, and trying to maybe decrease some over injuries or overuse injuries through doing a pitch count, depending on your situation, your position, and different things, and trying to just ramp that up gradually. Because a lot of
So if
players will
I
just
could,
hop on the field and just hammer a bunch of shots, and they're not quite ready.
no, no,
Yeah.
the movement prep isn't there, and they've been sitting in wheelchairs essentially, whether
Yeah.
you call them cars or office desk settings. But okay, if I could pull out my crystal ball here and kind of look
Mhm.
into it, I'm just going to predict that adductors, hamstrings, were Achilles, maybe low back and elbows. Is that what you're seeing primarily? Maybe neck,
Yeah,
actually, C spine too.
yeah, definitely a lot of neck strains that happen just from the impact and stick ricochets and follow throughs, getting hit with sticks, all that stuff, or getting checked and all that. But yeah, pretty much I'd say the number ones are adductors and hamstrings, hip flexors for sure, calf strains, Achilles, kind of more tendinopathy based stuff. We did have a Achilles rupture in pre or training camp this year. And then just your typical kind of knee ligamentous injuries and shoulder type rotator cuff or labral tears, things like that. And yeah, not as many elbow situations as you would see, but more of like the wrist and hand, and more of like the bony situation. So a lot of checking and getting hit in the wrist with sticks. So
Mm.
there's a lot of fractures, and then having to have surgery to get plates put in and fixated, things like that.
And so with these players, the PLL, like you say, it's just growing, and they don't
Hmm.
have the funding like some of the mainstream professional sports organizations. There's the amount that players make per capita is much lower, so there's not as much riding. I mean, it's not like multi-million-dollar
Mhm.
contract for this athlete, and they're going to listen to every word you say because their wallets on their line and their
Mhm.
longevity and career is on the line. Do you see that varies with your lacrosse players? Just kind of because of that?
I
Are they
do, I do.
compliant or are they
Yeah.
wavering with their compliance?
Every athlete's going to be a little different. I definitely have both ends of the spectrum that I've experienced with minimal compliance to absolutely do whatever you recommend. I'm going to dive in and dial it in from there. But you definitely see that challenge as a medical staff. But I think everybody loves it so much that from a player, from the front office of the PLO, from the owners that Mike and Paul Rabel, everybody is so invested and into it that they love the game and they're gonna it's like there's $1 million on the line because they're like, I love it, this is my opportunity to play my dream, my pro lacrosse dream. And they're like, I want to be out there, I want to be on the field as soon as I can. Now of course we always have those decision making situations of like, is this middle of the season, are we shooting for playoffs, like what are we trying to figure out with getting back in the field. But and a lot of players, they're like, I need to get this game checked because I need to pay my rent, so I really need to work hard and get out there. And but yeah, so it's kind of the same situation. It's just, less money on their line, but it is like their livelihood and their career and their love of the game that's on the line as well. So it's very similar in that sense.
And what are your top three roles and responsibilities with PLL?
I would say number one is weekend management of injuries, treatments, and working through just like game and practice prep. And number two, so that's like anything like manual therapy based, exercise, warm up based, loading, helping them understand their injuries. Number two would be communication, and that's communication with the player, whether it's performance based programs in the off season, throughout the season, or home program type stuff, and trying to improve, work on their conditioning and strength work, but also rehab at the same time and make sure they don't get deconditioned for the sport, but also rehab. And in communication with their PT. So if they end up getting an injury and they're going to physical therapy, say in New York City or in DC or in San Diego, I gotta then be in touch with their PT and the player themselves and make sure that they're progressing really well. Like, what's our timeline, what's our projections, and then help guide their return to sport testing and communication to then the front office and the league. So lots of communication. And then third would be, I would say, helping to just manage the whole medical team as a whole, and just trying to have us as one cohesive unit. So there's 8 athletic trainers, an athletic trainer per team, and then there's myself at Howard Head traveling as the lead, and then another coworker traveling with me and doing a great job. Um, Kind of working with the athletes over the weekend, and so just bringing everybody together, making sure everybody's on the same page, and flowing through the weekend. And kind of then that comes with also equipment management on the weekends too, where we have the equipment that travels week to week. We set up a treatment room in a hotel, and I work really hard to try to make it a kind of familiar environment for the athletes so they feel comfortable working with us.
This sounds like a full-time job, and yet you also have this other responsibilities at Howard
Absolutely.
Head. So how many hours are we talking, Nate?
Yeah, I lose count half the time. Generally the weekend will take up from anywhere from 40 to 55, 60 hours, and that includes travel time. Trying to travel from Vail to the East Coast takes a while. And then I work in the clinic throughout the week, doing my lead physical therapy duties, and then a lot of communication. We have an injury report call every Monday where we talk about the status of the injured players and their rehab progressions and what are we thinking, all that stuff. As the medical director, the league's doc or surgeon, the head athletic trainer, and the front office all come together. So yeah, it's a lot of hours, but it's awesome though. I really love it, and a lot of times on the weekends I might be working 14-hour days, but it doesn't really feel like work half the time because it's so fun and the guys are grateful. It's great.
Do you remember your wife's name?
It starts with an O. I think it's Olivia. I'm pretty sure. Yeah,
Does she get to travel
exactly.
with you from time to time?
We did our first season a little bit, which was awesome. We kind of turned, extend some of the trips where it goes from then we're like hanging out and going on a little adventure afterwards, and then my responsibilities my second season increased, so I couldn't do that as much, and then it increased again this year, so it keeps going up. I remember thinking my first season was tough, and then it got much harder, and then it got much harder again. So we're right there with it, but it's all going really well.
And give me a calendar breakdown of when preseason begins, when in season, and then postseason, off season.
Great, yeah. End of May is going to be around Memorial Day. Is going to be the start of training camp, in which training camp usually lasts about 10 days, and that's right at the same time as the college Final Four and the national championship. And so it starts around there, and then runs into middle September. So then, yeah, we start the first round of playoffs this upcoming week of Labor Day, and then it'll go. That's quarterfinals. There'll be a couple games on Labor Day, and then two games for the semifinals the week after in Long Island, and then the championships in Philly, the 15th, I believe, of September.
And then post or off season goes basically October till March or all
Yeah,
the way to
pretty much
May.
it, all the way to May, and hopefully, I mean, the preseason kind of communication and strength and conditioning stuff is hopefully happening throughout that time. There is also an off-season tournament that's a week long called the Championship Series that has been in DC the last couple of years. So there's a 10-day trip in February where the top four teams in the PLO get to play in the Championship Series in the off season, and it's kind of a way to promote a different style of lacrosse where it's called sixes, where it's a very intense kind of high pace or high speed, fast paced game. Super exciting stuff, fun to watch and be a part of. And then, so that's a good way of in the middle of the off season to get your PLO fix, so to speak. And then it's great to reconnect with the guys during that time. And then another break, and then it goes into the next year.
So with the sixes, is that like the rugby sevens where it's for sixes it would be 6 minute halves with 6v6?
Yeah, similar, where it's very fast. It's the games are cut in half, so it's an hour long instead of 2 hours. That is also something very cool about lacrosse that I didn't know going into it, that the games are very like on the money, 2 hours. But then the sixes format and the championship series are an hour long, and that's gonna be the similar format for the Olympics when lacrosse is back in the Olympics in LA 28. That's very
That's
exciting
going to
times.
be, yeah, that's awesome. I grew up playing lacrosse, but not
Love it.
organized. It was just everyone
As
had
it,
sticks in the Northeast. It's just, yeah, it
love
was
it.
just the way it was kind of like if you weren't playing hockey in the wintertime, pond hockey, then when the pond melts, you just hit guys with sticks that have nets on them instead of blades. It was pretty
That's
cool.
perfect.
But damn, man, that is a long off season, October to
Hmm.
May. I don't know
Yeah,
of any other sport that's like that. Curling,
yeah.
maybe. No, not even curling. I mean, so
So
what does that do? Like,
so the
what's the
challenge,
ramifications? Yeah.
um, it's sometimes the biggest ramification is like losing contact with the player. Sometimes maybe they get busy and they stop responding and talking about the rehab and their off-season training or working on stuff that they kind of knew they came out of the season with, or something that we need to work on. And so that's the biggest challenge there. And then, but the side situation is there's the National Lacrosse League, so the indoor lacrosse league that basically runs the opposite time. And so a lot of the guys, I'm not familiar with the percentage, but a large amount of the players in the PLL also play indoor. So there's some guys that if you go far in the PLL playoffs, or into the championship, and then you go far in the NLL season, that you might play professional lacrosse every weekend almost for the entire year.
Do you have
It's
a relationship with your counterpart in the NLL? Because I mean, they're basically playing in a hockey rink, and and
Yes, yep,
and they're slamming boards and bodies. I mean, it's
yep.
it's much more like hockey than outdoors. So, is there
Mhm.
somebody that's your counterpart there? Do you keep communication with them?
We don't. It's pretty tricky because the NLL itself is like every team is a their own entity, individually owned, that kind of thing. So then in the PLO, there's one group of owners at this point before they go city based in the future, and so it's kind of like one big group for us. We're all a big close knit family. It's so then every other team in the NLL is going to have their own staff, their own kind of like home base and city, and so it is really tricky. So we do our best as a medical staff to be in contact and do exit physicals going into the NLL season, and then do entry physicals when they come out of the NLL season. So, and communicate as best as we can and be as professional as we can, because we're all, doing the same thing and trying to help these guys out.
Okay, secret sauce time. Like if you were to give advice to the listening audience, which are basically individuals, mid-20s to 40 or so, the
Mhm.
prime audience there in the same field as yourself or athletic training, maybe they're aspiring to follow into professional sports or high-level college like D1. What kind of advice might you impart upon them?
I think if you're coming from a pretty strict physical therapy background, I would really highly recommend getting to work with a performance-based coach, or really learning more about the strength and conditioning realm in kind of that sports medicine or that very direct athlete kind of rehab process. Because I feel a lot of times, and this was me, early on in my career, where it's you think you're doing enough to kind of prepare the athlete and to load and to test and prepare them for their sport, but ultimately um, basic exercises in the clinic are not going to then translate to going full speed on the field and having contact and cutting and decelerating and stuff. So I think a lot of times the intensity of loading and the exercises and that prescription needs to be more. So then if you can have a good background in strength and conditioning and performance-based stuff, learn from coaches, learn from those those members of sports med teams, then I think that can go a long way in you prescribing the proper rehab for your athletes. Because I think a lot of times PTs underdose, underserve in that way, and I think we could get a lot better at that. And so, yeah, trying to kind of take a step back and kind of look at the big picture a bit more and say, like, this is what's needed for the sport, and I have to prepare them for that, and then help your athlete understand that as well.
All right. Now, are you a social media mogul? Are you doing blogs and vlogs and posts and all that? If people wanted to follow your trials and tribulations, how could they do that?
I am not huge into that. I follow a lot of people, but at the end of the day, as you heard the schedule, especially in the summer, I don't really have much time for it, and so I don't post a lot. And when I do, recently, it's PLL related and trying to promote that. But it is Nate Neff PT on Instagram. But yeah, it's not going to be a very exciting page if you follow me. Just so you know.
No problem. Well, I mean, I really am from my heart grateful that you've kept aside some time for us to have this conversation. I really appreciate it. And it's really cool to see the league growing, and I really hope it grows into something pretty amazing, even more than what it is right now. So, Nate, this
Yeah,
has been
thank you.
great. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, and then I appreciate it. It's really fun being on the ground level of the PLO, and it's progressing every year, and I can't wait to see what happens, and especially after the Olympics and after it hopefully grows even more, and it's going to be a great ride for sure.
Heck
Thank you
yeah.
for having me for sure.
2028 in LA. Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah.
And that brings this episode of Zelos to a close. Thank you, Nate and PLL, for coming on. Don't forget, November 3rd, check us out, RockySnyder.com for CEUs. Also, Satanta College, RS10 is the code for 10% off tuition. And maybe check out my book, Return to Center, Strength Training to Realign the Body, Recover from Pain, and Achieve Optimal Performance. Follow us on Instagram at Rocky_Snyder, and we'll see you next week.